Okay, my name is Shannon Buckley. My class got out in May, so I have my 2 adult students here. But this reading strategy works well for any age, elementary school through adulthood, because it's just good reading strategies. So we have a nonfiction article from the Washington Post called "We Crave That Sweet Taste, but at What Cost?" And our activity that we're doing today is marking the text and then using Cornell notes to help with our comprehension of a text. The purpose of this is to practice annotating and giving you strategies for what to do when annotating a text, giving you a purpose for reading, and also pulling out essential information from an informational text. So the first thing you're going to do, if you look at your notes on the side, is we're going to go through a reading of this article. You're going to circle numbers and dates. You're going to underline names and locations. And names could be names of people. It could be names of texts. Journals or books. It could be names of places. And then you're going to use your highlighter and you're going to highlight authors' claims. And I have a note for you there that authors' claims could be arguable statements or assertions supported by data, facts, or other logical findings and backings. And I also have these instructions here for you. So I'm going to do the first few paragraphs with you guys. So if you have your pen and you have your highlighter, let's start looking through this article. So, too much sugar can be detrimental to health, rotting teeth, building fat, damaging blood vessels, and stressing out the system that regulates blood sugar. Right there, we are starting off with an author's claim, so I would highlight that. Too much sugar can be detrimental to health. And I'm going to also highlight the details there because it helps support that claim. Some people turn to artificial sweeteners, but those are under increasing suspicion of creating such metabolic problems as diabetes and obesity. Again, we have an author's claim there, so I'm gonna highlight the artificial sweeteners, and then I'm gonna say create metabolic problems such as diabetes and obesity. Oftentimes when people highlight when they read, they kind of just highlight everything. So we wanna keep in mind that we are highlighting for author's claims. Natural alternatives to sugar sweeteners exist, but even they have pitfalls if consumed in excess. We are hardwired to love sweets. And you've already kind of preemptively got that from me. If it starts with the tongue, at the first bite of a dessert, our taste buds send a jolt of the splendid news to the brain, which responds by releasing a pleasure-calling neurotransmitter called dopamine, a cozy chemical reward for scoring what our brain senses as high-caloric food. So that term here, dopamine, it releases dopamine, so I'm going to highlight that part. Responds by releasing a pleasure-causing neurotransmitter called dopamine. And dopamine is kind of the first name term that's given to us. So I'm also going to take my pen and I'm going to underline dopamine. In this case, is kind of a name that's going to be crucial to our reading. A boon of extra calories can benefit people who occasionally encounter sweet foods. For example, when our Paleolithic ancestors happened upon ripe autumn fruits, ingestion of the simple sugar fructose stimulated their appetites, encouraging them to eat more and more. There was a boon for both vegetation and people. Gorging on grapes would lead to greater seed dispersal for the plants, and the eater's seasonal food of fructose into human bodies was converted by their livers into fat, stored energy that would help them survive the winter. If we were to highlight a claim in that paragraph, what do you think we would highlight?
A boon of extra calories can be beneficial to people who occasionally encounter sweets.
Good. Let's highlight that. And then they gave us an example. So you're going to go through the rest of the article now. Again, remember you're going to be circling numbers and dates. We haven't gotten one yet, but you will. Underline names and locations and highlight author's claims, and I will do it with you as you work. Okay, so you might have noticed you had a lot of highlighting, and that's okay in this situation because as an informational text, there are a lot of author's claims in an article like this. So let's look through right now and choose 2 author's claims that we can share. So look through and just choose 2, and then we'll each read our 2 author's claims. Who would like to start?
I'll start.
Okay.
No one actually needs to eat sweeteners of any kind, said Swithers.
Foods and beverages that are sweetened, regardless of the type of sweetener, should be thought of as occasional treats, not as things that are consumed on a daily basis.
Large-scale studies correlate the use of artificial sweeteners with weight gain. Let's go around one more time for our second ones.
The use of artificial sweeteners seems to coincide with the decline in obesity rates.
Synthetic sweeteners, saccharin, sucrose, equal, upset the balance of intestinal, where's that from? In here, that word that didn't print right, causing a glucose intolerance in mice and in some humans tested.
And that was flora. I
Okay.
saw that too. Non-caloric sweeteners appear to mislead us into what scientists call metabolic derangement. Okay, so from what you pulled just now, why did you pick the claims that you did to share? Where are those ones that you shared with us?
Well, I felt that when it said seems to coincide, that kind of indicates that it's an author's claim, not based on any kind of scientific evidence.
Okay, good. So you looked at the word choice of seems, and it's not quite a fact, but it's an author's claim.
And I think basically what they're saying is anything that's sweetened, no matter how it's sweetened, is going to be some sort of problem. They keep repeating that over and over.
Okay, good. So repetition often shows us author's claims in a work. Okay, good. So we've looked at the text, we've broken down the text. By the way, what are some numbers that you saw, that you circled?
15% of Americans, 308 overweight and obese dietary people.
Those who drank diet beverages lost an average of 13 pounds in 12 weeks, compared to those of 9 pounds who drank only water.
Okay, good. So when using this strategy, again, it lets you look for something in the text besides just reading it and kind of leaving your mind. We have a little dog that keeps jumping up here, so that is what we are laughing at. It gives you something to focus on. It gives you something to search for in a text. And it helps you really comprehend better when you have specific things to look for. So the next strategy that we're going to be looking at then is once you've kind of taken your annotations, you've looked at a text, you've read through it, you've comprehended it, is a way to then interact with that text more, and it's a form called Cornell Notes. So what I'm passing out right now is called Costa's Levels of Questioning, and it is in the shape of a house. At the foundation, you'll see question 1, level 1, is gathering. So those kinds of words that are gathering questions start with classify, identify, select, memorize, translate, recall. What do you notice about questions that would start with those words? What kind of questions are those?
They're designed to elicit a response or to get you to do something, like locate, remember, recall, repeat.
So if you were going to do that right now, if I asked you to define something from this text or locate, what would you need to do to answer that question?
What would I need to do in my text?
Mm-hmm.
To locate it?
Mm-hmm.
Well, now that I've highlighted it, it would be easier because I would look back to what I highlighted because that would indicate that that was information that was integral to the article, like circling numbers and names.
Okay, good. So you'd have to find it in your text, right? So you'd have to go back to the text to do it. So a level 1 question is a question you can just find in the text. You can look at what you highlighted and say, okay, here it is. Right. Here's the answer.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a minimal amount of thought. So then if we look up in the house, we see processing questions too. So we see attribute, deconstruct, experiment, outline, choose, execute, sketch, illustrate, question, explain why. So those questions, they take a little bit more brain power. So instead of just finding the definition, you have to explain why this kind of thing happens. That's called the level 2 question. Level 1 question, they often say, is a 1-finger question. You can take 1 finger and you can point to it and find the answer with 1 finger. Whereas processing questions is often 2-finger questions. So once I need to compare, you can kind of take 2 fingers, you say, okay, here's artificial sweeteners, here's actual sugar, let's talk about the answers. So it takes a little bit more thought. And then level 3 question is applying. So you can see design, imagine, invent, construct, speculate, appraise, critique, evaluate. So if you think about critique, they mentioned in the article that when they actually did this study, the American Beverage Association conducted this study, they did find that the people who were using artificial sweeteners as opposed to water actually lost more weight, right? So there's like an incongruent fact here with what the whole article is trying to say. So an example of a question I could write using a level 3 question would maybe be critique the validity of a study done by the American Beverage Association. So I'm going to write that in my margin here because it's an example of a level 3 question. So if you look at like the second to last full paragraph on the first page, and it said, you know, those who drink diet beverages lost an average of 13 pounds. I'm going to write here, critique the validity of a study conducted by the American Beverage Association. So if it was a level 1 question, it would be who did the study, right? Define who did the study. But a level 3 question is asking us to critique, you know, what is the validity of the study conducted by the American Beverage Association? And what do you guys think? How do you think that the American Beverage Association conducting this study that favored artificial sweeteners, like what do you think the significance is of that?
I think their questions were geared to make people say things that would be to their benefit.
Right. Good. And so being able to use those words for that level 3 question, that's kind of eliciting more critical thought. So you are, you know, interacting with this text in a higher level way. You're thinking about, okay, well, what is the validity of that study? What are the effects of that? And so you're thinking about the text in a more advanced way. So what I want you to do right now, because this is the first step of doing Cornell notes, are creating questions in your margins. And if you think about these questions, if you're in a class, these questions might be possible test questions. You're kind of like predicting what kind of test questions might be formed with these questions. And if it's really just for interacting and reading a text, these questions could be like we just did, that would maybe elicit good discussion, or maybe ask you to look at a text in a different way. So what I want you to do is I want you to create 3 questions in the margins of either the first or the second page, and I want you to create these questions that are either level 2 or level 3 questions. So from either the middle of the house or the roof of the house. So again, your step is you are creating 3 higher level questions, either level 2 or level 3 questions, or a combination of both, and you are writing those questions in your margins.
Okay.
Okay, so again, by creating these questions, you're thinking about the text in a higher level way. You also chose what part of the text to create questions for, so you're kind of taking the personal connections you made with the text and like choosing those parts. So it's kind of, you know, the way that you're thinking, you're choosing what stuck out to you and you're making a question for it. So let's share one of your questions that you wrote. One of your really good level 2 or level 3 questions.
Compare how we switch our behavior towards ingesting more caloric sweeteners to curb our own intake.
Okay, good, thank you.
I used, from the non-caloric sweeteners can also produce cognitive disorders quote. I wrote, what kind of tests could be used to detect cognitive disorders?
Okay, good. And so you're also kind of like bringing in outside connections here, which again helps just really your brain process this information. So the purpose of Cornell Notes is to kind of take in your information in one setting, and then about 10 minutes later to do the first step of Cornell Notes. So we wrote our questions. And then a day later, you should look back on your notes, back on your questions, and the last step of Cornell Notes is writing a summary at the bottom of the page. So kind of like thinking about what you learned and in about 2 to 3 sentences summarizing it. So you're again looking at the text, interacting with the text, and then coming up with a summary that you can quickly scan and like quickly review your notes. So you're going to look at what you highlighted because you've already pulled out the main information. and you're gonna write a 2 to 3 sentence summary at the bottom of the paper. And let's just do the first page for now. So you're reading what you highlighted, and in your own words, in 2 to 3 sentences, you're summarizing it and writing that summary at the bottom of the page. For my summary for the first page, I wrote, artificial sweeteners can lead to obesity. And then I said, more food has to be eaten to feel satisfied when ingesting artificial sweeteners.
I wrote, oh, do you want to read it?
Yeah.
I wrote, too much sugar can affect humans in a variety of negative ways. Diseases like diabetes and obesity can be directly correlated to sugar intake, and artificial sweeteners are actually no better.
Too much sweetener of any kind can be detrimental to health. Obesity rates, liver disease, kidney damage, and circulatory system problems may all be attributed to ingestion of sugars. Read your labels.
Good. So now when reviewing your notes, you don't have to read the whole article again. You could just read your summary. You could just look at your questions or what you highlighted. And we did this with an article, but Cornell notes can also be used if you're taking notes in a class. You would have your paper about 2 to 3 inches kind of siphoned off here, and then you'd have some room at the bottom, and you take your notes just the way you take notes here, and then 10 minutes later you would either write some questions or you write your summary, and then 24 hours later you do the second part, whatever you didn't do. So it's having your brain take that information and move it to short-term to long-term memory. And that was annotating a text and making Cornell notes. Any questions?
Great idea. No, it's a great idea.
All right.